to be Canadian and they don't want to be French. You know, if you talk to a French Canadian and you say, well, when I was in Paris, they're like, we are not French. And I'm like, well, the fuck are you, a moose? Own one of these things. You're either a donut-eating hockey player or you're French, so shut up. I got a note this afternoon from somebody who was going to bring their 6-year-old kid. Which has only occurred to me after this storm of blue language that I've unleashed on you. So, anyway, so, how are we doing on time? I'll answer questions in a little while, but I have some stuff I need to cover. So art, all this, you know, if you wanted to make a living, you know, for years and years, like hundreds of years, from the time that people actually started painting in the Middle Ages with oils and whatnot, it was all the church or the royals, the nobles. And so you had to stay within the rules of what everybody said was the academy. It was a craft. It wasn't really an art. It was the same way that you learned to do goldsmithing. In fact, a lot of the Renaissance painters and sculptors were goldsmiths before they taught themselves how to paint or went to a workshop and learned how to paint. The greatest Italian sculptor that ever lived, if you don't count Michelangelo, Bernini was a goldsmith. Anyway, so all of a sudden these guys, they're the sons of grocers or tailors. Renoir's father was a tailor, grew up in what had been the slum that was the courtyard of the Louvre. When the Louvre was a royal palace, it was a slum right in the middle of it, where now there's a big glass pyramid for no apparent reason. And all these guys who could have made the choice to paint, and certainly had the skills to paint the way the Academy said you should paint, decided, no, we're going to go outside and we're going to paint life as we see it. And so in 1863, Edward Manet does this painting that he calls Luncheon in the Grass. He called it that in French, but if I say that, then 5 of you will correct my pronunciation in French. So it was called, we'll say it was Luncheon in the Grass. And it was a nude of a picture of a nude woman sitting with some clothed men by a stream. It was exhibited with hundreds of other nudes. It was based on an old Titian painting of the same motif, but because it was real people, everybody freaked out. It was like, and that was the beginning of Impressionism. It was all these young artists, Monet and Cézanne and Renoir and Pissarro, were standing around this painting going, whoa, and there's a scene in Sacre Bleu where that happens, where you see that happen. They're going, dude, this changes everything. Manet never called himself an Impressionist, but he basically started, that's where Impressionism starts. And it's all these guys against their interests who decide, I'm going to paint the way I want to. And it wasn't like a week and then they won, you know, American Idol and they were famous painters. You know, they did this, they struggled for 20, 30 years before they were starting to be recognized. And basically, they started to be recognized because of us, because of the Americans. Because an art dealer named Duran Rule comes over in 1886, he's decided to represent all these guys, and he can't sell their paintings in Paris, and he brings a bunch of them to New York. And what did America have at the end of the 19th century? Shitloads of cash. You had Carnegie's, you had J.P. Morgan, you had industry happening. And so the paintings sold immediately, all of them, in New York. And it's one of the reasons that if you go around the country in the United States, the way I do on book tour, you get to see some of the greatest Impressionist paintings in the world. Chicago has almost as good a collection of Impressionists as Paris does, because there was money in Chicago when they were selling. Philadelphia, I was on book tour, and I was in Chicago one day in a room with 16 Monets, and I was in Philadelphia the next day in a room with 16 Monets. And there's something that happens when you look at these paintings long enough. Because when I'm on book tour, I have to put up, you guys have to put up with this once every 2 years. I have to do this every night. Can you imagine how sick of me I am? You know? So, and all day I'm like on radio going, yeah, wow, my book is awesome. You should buy many copies. And so I have like 2 hours in each city, and I go out to these art museums, and for 2 hours I look at paintings, and it is not about me. And much to my surprise, my amazement, there's a shift that happens when you look at great painting for a while. And it's mystical. And it's so not about you. But everything you look at suddenly looks like art. Everything. And you go down, I remember at the Chicago Institute of Art, which is a great museum and a school, but it's one of the greatest museums in the world. And I had been there looking at painting for a couple hours, and I went down to the cafeteria to get a cup of coffee, and I sat there, and I watched this lady. She was probably mid-80s, maybe 90, eating green beans. And I know she was eating these green beans with the same feeling I had watching her eating these green beans. It was an art. It was just every moment was appreciating the look and feel and texture and taste of that moment of those green beans. And so I threw her on the table and we shagged. No, I made that up.